and thank you for joining us at the ever-improving No Soundbites Allowed podcast. My name is Michael Vasquez. We thank you for joining us in this adventure of describing the politics that go on in our nation on a personal and local level as often as possible, giving you, the audience, more than just 30 seconds to understand what's going on in our nation. We look forward to joining you as we go. Just sit back, enjoy the ride. Please remember, if you like the episodes, like it, share it, let other people know, and if you can, please donate, even if it's $2, even if it's $5, because it all makes a difference. We thank you, and here we go. Hello, everybody, and I'm happy to be here with you. That's right. This is Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier, on the No Soundbites Allowed podcast, doing a simulcast with the Facebook Live right now with you. And I'm very happy to be here with everybody. I hope everybody can hear me well. And we're going to have a great episode today. But the very first thing I always like to mention, and I always want you to understand, is I appreciate and I thank you, each and every one of you, for just being here, to be involved, to ask your questions, to listen to the program. I thank each and every one of you for that. And I see Ronald Stafford's actually here with us already. Hey, Ron, it's good to see you there. And let me throw on my glasses so I can see everything a little bit better. And Ron, just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me properly. Yep, perfect. So there's a lot I want to talk about in this episode. And I want to take your questions. I want to hear what everyone has to say about a lot of these issues, because I think it affects all of us deeply, and it's very important. But I want to start off with a little bit of housekeeping here, in case people are not aware. On July 15th, there's going to be a event that's going to be happening at the Binghamton Holiday Inn. It's going to be, it's already public. I think a lot of people may have heard about it, but in case you didn't, both Congresswoman Claudia Tenney and the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Devin Nunes, is going to be here in Binghamton speaking to the public. It's a closed event. There's $25 per attendee, and I know there aren't a lot of seats left, but please, if you're interested, if you would like to hear about the House Committee and to hear Congresswoman speak, please do get in touch with their office, and they'll be able to, the campaign office for Congresswoman Claudia Tenney, they'll be able to get you into that event. So I just wanted to mention that. Also, if you have not heard, so far we've done an interview, recently we've done interviews with State Senator Fred Akshar, with County Executive Jason Garnar, Assemblyman Clifford Crouch, and we have upcoming next week, we will be interviewing Assemblywoman Donna Lopardo of the 123rd Assembly District. So that's going to be exciting, and we're looking forward to that. We've spoken with Assemblywoman Lopardo many times in the past, and we're looking forward to doing it again. So we're going to have a great conversation with her, and that'll be coming next week. You'll see that interview, unless there's a change in her schedule. But we're looking forward, on the 20th. Correction, it'll be on the 20th, July 20th, that we'll be speaking with her. We're looking forward to that. So I know that I just wanted to do a little bit of house cleaning there and talking about a couple of those issues, just so people know what's going on. And let's get into the big issue, because there are other little issues, like the Binghamton's getting $1 million to deal with poverty. It's anti-poverty payment that they're going to be receiving, and it's just a farce. That is a farce. You cannot defeat poverty by throwing money at it. It never works. It hasn't worked yet, and it's not going to work for Binghamton. It's not new. We did it in 2016. We had received money. 2015, we had received money, same amounts. It didn't work then. It's not going to work going forward. And I do want to talk about that if someone has a question on it. But let's talk about the big question that I teased here on Facebook, and that is there going to be a second civil war? That's a really big question. Is there going to be a second civil war in the nation? And if there is, how is that going to affect people? And that's really a scary thought. Now, a lot of people, maybe someone's heard this before, maybe not. Let me throw on my little sound bite here. There it is. And I love my sound effects. Newsflash. Newsflash. That's right. It's a news flash talking about the fact that there was a recent report, June 28th, from Rasmussen Reports. They did a poll, and 31% of the nation believe that within the next 5 years, there is going to be a civil war in the United States. That's shocking. 5 years from today, 31% of the population believes that there will be a civil war. And I was talking about this a little bit in my previous podcast, which was out yesterday, talking about how did we get to this point? How could that be possible that we could be looking at having a civil war in this nation? That people are looking at the divisions leading to violence on a grand scale. And we've seen this, the Civil War we had in 1861. That was incredible. I mean, 622,000 Americans died. That's huge. We've never had such a huge number of people who have died in a war. Even wars combined didn't reach the Civil War level. So it's a big thing when we're talking about the fact that violence is so imminent on such a grand scale in this nation, and we're that divided. And the potential repercussions from this are immense. I mean, just huge. But I was talking about it a little bit yesterday, and the thing that scares me about this and makes me feel that this is very real, that there is a very real chance of us having a second civil war, is there is foreignpolicy.com approximately 1 year ago did a poll themselves of experts, national security experts. And those experts about a year ago came out and they said, actually it was 2 years ago, they came out and they had said that they believed that there was a 30% chance then that America would be going into a civil war, with a couple of their professionals, their experts, stating, one of them saying that it was a 60% chance of this, one of them saying that there was a 95% chance of a civil war. But the public, the average citizens that they asked, came out with an 18% belief that there would be a second civil war coming. Now we see Rasmussen, and they're coming out with 31%. Now that would seem to indicate, and again, different companies doing different polls, but it would seem to indicate that the probability of a civil war coming out from 2016 to today has doubled. There's been double that impact. And that really is scary because that's showing a trend line. And if you checked out Google Trends, the term second civil war and the concern based on that is skyrocketed in the last month, actually in the last week. It's been a skyrocket that people are paying attention to this and becoming very concerned about this, where you haven't seen that before. No one was looking up second civil war. No one was discussing that. I did trace it back to about 2010 was maybe the first time that someone had considered or even spoken about the idea of there being a potential for a second civil war. And there's been only one or two references in 2011, 2014, 2016, just one or two times that we've seen it in the media that someone's been considering or talking about seriously the potential for a second civil war. And I wanted to say hello to Irma and Scott and Kevin for all being involved. So this isn't something that's just brand new. There's been this lingering thought for almost a decade now, from what I can see in my research, that people have been concerned about the idea that there could be a potential second civil war in the United States, and that it would that our nation is becoming that divisive and that separated in our views and that rigid in our views that we cannot talk to each other. And we've seen that really multiply towards the second term of President Obama and now here in the first term of President Trump. And I want to hear everyone's thoughts on this. Do you think this is possible? Do you think this is something that would happen? And what are the consequences? And I can tell you that in my thought, and as I was discussing it in my podcast yesterday, I trace this back. I would say that the likelihood of a civil war in the United States now in the 2000s is very real. And I believe it's very possible. And I trace that back to first Nixon. I think he shook the nation's trust in the executive branch. We saw that even made worse by the economic policy and the inaction of the executive branch under President Carter. We then saw Reagan revitalize some of that belief in America to a certain extent. And then from that point, after Reagan, we had Bush with his, no new taxes and the deception to the public, followed by Clinton. What's the definition of is? Completely destroying the belief in our leadership, in our executive branch, and being able to have trust and faith in them to be able to lead us and to tell us the truth and be honest with the American people. I think that's a big deal. And I think that had a big impact because once we got to Clinton, that's 2 generations, because there was about 20 years between them, 2 generations of Americans that had their faith in our government severely, internationally, dramatically affected and weakened. And then we go into Bush, who's then attacked by the media. Even though initially we had Bush GW come in, and we had the 9/11 attack, which kind of unified the nation. But then almost immediately, very shortly thereafter, the media started ripping into this and tearing apart the nation again on a partisan level, to the point that when we saw foreign nationals throwing shoes at our president, some in the media were actually applauding that. That's not good. And that detracts from the power of the executive, the confidence of the executive, and the people's confidence in our system. At the same time, we had a legislative system that was going nowhere. We became more and more bogged down by congressional hearings about things that either the past administration had done or to prevent the current administration from doing anything. And we kept seeing this increasing and fewer bills that most people thought made a difference. Well, fewer of these bills were getting passed. That people could say, okay, this is an important issue. Let's see how this is going to be addressed. And we saw less and less and less of that. And that's a problem. When you see that, that's a big problem. And then that brings us into the Obama years, where we had the opportunity for a resurgence once again. We had the opportunity for the nation to come back together, kind of like the way Reagan reunified the nation after going through Nixon and after going through Carter. We had that chance. And what we got instead was we were given the sales slogan, because that's what it is. And it's not about Obama. Every party does this. But the sales pitch was that we would get hope and change. Hope for what didn't get told, change to what we were never told, which is important, but it was that's just an empty statement. Just like Make America Great Again is a sales slogan as well. I'll give you that, which has, and that's maybe just as empty as hope and change, but not quite. But still, it's something that was trying to unify the nation. And instead, what we got was the VA scandal, an IRA scandal, the Benghazi scandal. We had all the issues with the Clinton email. We had every kind of scandal you could see. We saw that our government had become inept. It wasn't just Congress partisan bickering going on. No. It was far bigger than that. We didn't just get that. We also got the fact that not only was our legislative branch out of whack, all the administration was out of whack. And then you go further. And by the way, Ellis, I want to say hello to you and to Robert Force. I want to thank you as well. I see you're here. But so under Obama, at the middle of his first term, second term, we got to see a huge number of scandals showing that the administration was ineffective and incapable of being able to do its job of managing the nation on the federal level. We saw that our leader, who had promised us hope and change, was incapable of being able to provide that. The nation was not unified. We didn't have growth. We were told that we couldn't have economic growth again. We were told that coming out of the recession, the best we could hope for was just a new normal, which would be bad. We had all the economic plans fail. Nothing was working there. not only did we have an extended recession, but we also had, virtually no growth coming out of that. Nothing was coming together. And our leader, who had promised us many things, lied to us. 2013, the biggest lie of the year, according to PolitiFact, was you can keep your doctor. A lie that was proven that President Obama knew he was lying to us, because in 2010, the law changed. He was aware of it, and that there was no way possible to keep your doctor. So again, this goes back to, instead of having that Reagan moment where the nation was unified, or even during the second Bush after 9/11, where we had a chance for the nation to be unified again, instead what we got was a fracturing of the nation. We had the Professor Gates and the Beer Summit, where we had an amplification of the separation of the nation, where we had an amplification of the differences in the nation based on race, and a lack of trust from the executive branch to our law enforcement, and a distrust of our government itself from the government itself. President Obama did not exude a trust and faith in the country. Rather, he was trying to constantly change the country rather than try and support it. He had very little trust and faith in our military. Our international policy wasn't one of strength, but rather one of appeasement, where we were often apologizing or taking a second seat to international development and actions to other nations, saying that they should do it instead of us, that they should be the leaders in the forefront rather than us. This all combined to further erode our trust and confidence, and to separate us on partisan levels. There was no joining hands and coming across the aisle. I mean, you could see that as simply as, remember the C-SPAN meetings that President Obama was forced to have based on his campaign promise before Obamacare was passed, to discuss Obamacare with Republicans and Democrats and himself in front of the nation. And in those discussions on C-SPAN, you can look it up yourself, absolutely none of the issues that were offered by the Republicans were accepted by Democrats. In fact, they were all shot down during those meetings. And so you had publicly a display that there was going to be no joining or meeting in the middle of the road. There was going to be separation. So when you have all of that combined, and now you go into the Trump administration, who is exactly what the American public had been asking for. Someone who is not a politician, didn't do things on the same old political way, a change to the system, totally different, not a politician, come in and actually change everything. Well, that's exactly what we have gotten. And that means the good and the bad with that. You know, that means his Twitter accounts, that means his statements, his radical ideas sometimes. Some of his ideas are just radical, and the way he presents them radically. He's not a great person. He's not a good, what a lot of people would say, he's not a good guy. Okay. Not that any of our presidents really ever were, but this is all part of it. So when you put that together and you have a media that's constantly, since before he got, for 19 months, 20 months at least, we've seen the media telling us how horrible he is, how everything he is going to do and everything he is doing is absolutely the worst thing that could possibly happen. We've been told nonstop for 18 months that his economic policies are complete failures, and unemployment went down. And we've seen more jobs created. We've seen money come in from overseas. It's a disconnect with reality. We're being told on one side everything is horrible, yet on the other side, empirical data is coming across that says that no, things are actually improving and people are in a better shape than they have ever been. Again, that all that does is force people apart on partisan levels. And then we have these sound bites. We've been so well trained into sound bites and memes and social media that you have to believe one side or the other. And how dare you? And if you don't, we've come to this point that if you don't, then the answer is you're going to be considered a Nazi. I mean, we've heard that now, that people who are saying, hey, I don't necessarily agree. I have a different point of view. I'm listening to this and people say, oh, you voted for President Trump because you believed in changing the system and making it possible for economic change, to lower taxes, something that all parties, everyone on both sides have all promised that we would have our taxes lowered for 30 years. They've all been saying it. No one did it. It happens under Trump. And then all of a sudden, we're told that's absolutely evil and wrong, and that if you voted for President Trump, you're a Nazi. If he's following law that exists, the 2016 Ninth Circuit Court decision on separating children, illegal alien children, from their illegal alien parents as they go through the process of trying to see whether they have amnesty or they're going to be deported, that's a rule from 2016 that is law that the executive branch is to enforce. That is the position. That is what the executive branch is there for. That's their job, to enforce the law, not to create law, not to change law, but to enforce it as the law sits, as it comes out of the courts and out of the Congress. And people are saying, well, then you're a Nazi because, our president is enforcing the law as it exists. Well, that makes him a Nazi. And if you voted for him, regardless of your reasons, whether you thought Hillary Clinton was a criminal or she wasn't the best choice, or you thought Gary Johnson was the best choice or wasn't, and you didn't, and you voted for Trump for whatever reason, well, that means you're a Nazi. And that means you're one of the most evil people in the history of the world, or at least the modern centuries. And you're suddenly supposed to be this evil thing. And we have this belief that if you're evil to the extent of being a Nazi, well, then we can do anything we want to you. It's the proper thing is to fight the Nazis, to destroy the Nazis, to beat up the Nazis. And if we're calling each other Nazis, well, then we can just destroy them. Hi, Heather. Hi, Tina. Now, that brings us to, and again, talking about where we are currently in our nation. So we have the separation that we haven't seen before of, on one side, the media telling us how horrible someone is. We have the part of the politics telling us how terrible someone is. And then we have this other faction that's going on. We've got the Antifas, the political leaders of tomorrow, the Occupy Wall Street, these radicals of the far left, these extremists who are out there using violence to attack people on ideas that they don't like. That's all it is. They're attacking people for ideas they don't like. And they're trying to say, well, that they're justified because they're Americans and they can do it, and that it's the right thing to do. Well, that's never the right thing to do. No, that's just force. It doesn't matter. The excuse you're using for the force is not justified. I mean, speaking about Nazis, well, yeah, they had justifications for what they did. Slavery was justified during its time. So to say that, well, we're justified to have violence for people speaking, that's not right. That's not the American way. But we're seeing that. We are seeing that. And when we have this kind of discord in the nation, is it a surprise that we're seeing so many Americans, 31% of them, saying that we're heading towards a civil war? When we're talking about the lack of civility, where we have members of Congress, Maxine Waters, going out there and saying, well, because I'm a Democrat, because I have a feeling and I don't like what our president is doing for partisan political reasons, well, that means that anyone who is also in this party should go out and harass, which is an assault, to assault individuals that we have also, in that same party, members of them have come out and labeled other Americans as Nazis. Mind you, Maxine Waters, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, the Democratic Party didn't denounce people as they were saying during this whole debate about the children at the border, the illegal alien children being separated by law at the border. You didn't hear them come out and say, you shouldn't call people on the other side Nazis. I mean, it was on CNN, MSNBC. There was all kinds of articles about this. calling people Nazis because they said, well, there's a law and we should follow it. And they said, well, no, not only is President Trump a Nazi for living up to the law, anyone who voted for him is a Nazi. And not one Democrat came out and said that I'm aware of, and if there is one, please let me know, because I don't want to mislabel this. But I saw no leadership, no elected official or supposed leader of Democratic Party or of any of these far left groups come out and say, well, no, you can't call other Americans Nazis just because they voted for someone and you don't like the policy that's going on. No one's ever done that before. And suddenly we're doing that. And so, yeah, it's kind of hard to talk to someone when the other side is saying you are some of the most evil people that have ever existed in modern history. So evil and vile that we had an entire world war about this. That scares me. So I'm not surprised at the lack of civility, the fact that people are asking, that are labeling other people based on their feelings. Group X, we're talking about the far left, are labeling people because they don't agree with the thoughts those people have. And are labeling them in the most extreme manner possible to justify taking physical action, force, assault against these individuals to justify themselves. And we're supposed to have a conversation. How do you have a conversation? How do you have a conversation when someone is saying you can't speak? How can you have a conversation when someone's saying you can't think? That they don't allow that. I mean, look at all the conversations when we see Ben Shapiro, when we see Dave Rubin. We see a lot of speakers go out there, they go to college campuses and they want to share a thought. They want to speak about their ideas. It doesn't matter. No one says you have to agree with them. No one says you have to go to the events. But if you do go to the events, what they go there for is to shut it down. I mean, I've seen that here in Binghamton, in New York State, in Binghamton, in Broome County. I've seen it where going into an event with my Congresswoman Claudia Tenney, and I'm going in to hear her speak, and I'm looking at a crowd that was bussed into the area of about 40 people who come on out and they're screaming and shouting and trying to, shout down the event. I've actually been in events where individuals have come from those kind of crowds, those far left groups, and come into events and they've tried to create a ruckus for the mere purpose of being caught on the news as being a disruptor, as being someone who is trying to just shout down another voice because they don't like it. Not that they were asking a question. I mean, if they had just stayed and waited until the end of the event, they could have spoken to the Congresswoman. Everyone else in the event did. Could have asked a question. Could have asked any question they wanted. We all did. They were there in the event. They got in. They were in. So they could have just been very patient like everyone else and polite and civil, waited their turn, had an opportunity to ask the question. Everyone was answered. Everyone got a chance to ask a question, and they would have been able to have a question presented and answered. But instead, they got shouted down. They had to try and shout down the Congresswoman, shut down the event, stop people from being able to share ideas and to get answers. How do you have a conversation with someone who's doing that, who believe that that's the right answer, that they should stop people from being able to speak? And they're inciting violence. And yeah, I do believe that the far left is inciting violence. Look at what we saw in the baseball field. Guy comes over. Oh, there's a bunch of congressmen in baseball field. Are they Democrats or Republicans? He's told they're Republicans. Goes out, goes home, gets his gun, comes back and shoots up the field, trying to kill the Republicans because he knows they're there. Really? How can we not say that we're heading towards a civil war? Look at all the things we see laid out in front of us. Antifa with its violence, constantly going out for the purpose of committing violence. That's what the group is there for, to enact violence against those who don't have the same belief as them. Now, mind you, you may not agree with me, and that's okay. You don't have to agree with me. I don't expect everyone to agree with me. But if you disagree with me, please just let me know. Just send me a question. Or if you agree, send me a statement. Let me know what you're thinking. I'm just sharing what my thoughts are based on what I've looked at here, and to bring you up to speed on what this discussion about a second civil war really is about. And I find it quite troubling indeed. So, and I want to go into that because I see this is the way we lose our nation, quite honestly. Because if we do, in fact, have a civil war, this is where the problem comes. It's probably based on just the demographics of it. You're looking at roughly 5 major cities or major strongholds for the Democrats overall. They're basically located geographically on the coast. That's the highest concentrations, right next to major bodies of water, the coast in particular. And in Northeast and California, West Coast. And if there were a civil war, the center of the nation is pretty much conservative. And that's also where the food is. And that's where almost everything has to be transported through. And a lot of the hubs are found there. And that's also where most of the gun owners are. And a lot of the militia groups and a lot of other individuals are located in the center of the nation. So you have the center of the nation fighting against the edges of the nation. And they outnumber, the center of the nation outnumbers the coasts. So if there were to be a civil war, you're looking at that center group fighting against the edges, and more likely than not, that's not going to bode well for the liberals or the far left or that edge, those edges of the nation. The liberals, the far left, Democrats tend to be, not to say that they all are, but they tend to be essentially far less well trained, far less well armed. I mean, they don't have as many of the firearms as many other people in the nation. They don't have the training. The military tends to be conservative. So, and the military would probably side more so with the conservatives than the liberals for the most part, we would expect. So that's not a good scenario. Not to say that this would be instantaneous, that this would just turn around in a day. But we are talking about the coasts, which would be more liberal, are going to start losing. And this is, take a year, maybe 2, probably 2, because you're not going to overrun New York City in a day. Not going to happen. I don't care if you were trying to take it from any side. You're not going to do it. Too many people there. Too many guns there. Too many different types of people there. But can you imagine the infighting in New York City? It would be huge. Huge. Factional. Just all over the place. Block against block, almost. And you would see that in California, and you would see it in other parts of the nation. So imagine that. And my thought is that after about 2 years or so, the left would probably start losing over more significantly. And at that point, or maybe even before that, I know that I was reading something recently, and someone said, well, once that would happen, well, then China and Mexico would be invited to come into the fight because China would be able to supply support weapons and food and such to the coasts to keep them in the fight. And that, Mexico would rise up and come up across the border and help out to fight in favor of the Democrats or the liberals. And I think that's the most terrifying thought I can ever hear. But let me stop because Tina has a thought on this as well, Tina DeBella. And Tina says, I thought the House, I want to get the full question here. Hang on one second, Tina. So, sorry about that. Technology. I'm not perfect, but I do want to read the question from Tina. And Tina says, I thought the House had a, quote, pledge of civility, quote, on the record. Why wouldn't the calling for harassment and stalking by Maxine Waters be published? I mean, if the so-called leadership is calling for this and it is not being punished, why wouldn't the people follow suit? And yes, I do believe we are on the road to civil war, completely perpetuated by leftists. Thank you for that question. Thank you for that. So, Tina, let me answer that. Yes, there is a pledge of civility. It is part of the oath. It's part of the comments in the House of, Congress in general. It is part of their duty. But Maxine Waters obviously hasn't taken that very seriously, or she believes that what she's doing is justified anyway. But it is something that she has been called for censure. There is a vote out there. It has been called. She is potentially going to be in front of the ethics committee and or censured by other members of Congress. So that is something that is happening to punish her for this. It is limited in what it can and cannot do. But a lot of people have recognized that. Even other Democrats, not many of them, but some, have come out and said, well, you're doing the wrong thing, Maxine, and you need to change that. And Representative Waters believes that she's doing the right thing. She thinks that it's perfectly fine for what she's doing. And she thought that she's justified, and she's doubled down since that time, saying, no, she's fine, and people should just be okay with that. Now, that being said, people are following through with this, and we are seeing an impact of what she's talking about. In fact, there was a recent case. I believe it was the Kino Jimenez. A lot of people may not be familiar with this. It's very recent. A man in Texas, a 30-year-old guy, was in a restaurant. I think it's called Whataburger down in Texas. But basically, it's a burger shop. And there were 3 kids, white, they're teenagers. They're having a meal. The kids were, at least one of them was wearing a hat, one of the MAGA hats, Make America Great hats. And the 30-year-old was offended by this, went over to the kids, the teenagers, grabbed the hat from them, grabbed the drink from one of the kids and threw it in their face and walked off with the hat in hand. There's a couple of crimes here. Obviously assault, also a robbery. And since this was a robbery with an assault under Texas law, that is another special category. And so this gentleman was arrested for this, and he's looking at serious time because he's committed a couple of offenses. And he justified it, and he felt justified in this because he doesn't agree with our president. And he doesn't believe in the policies of our country at this moment under this president. And he thought, like many, under the justification was that, like Maxine Waters said, harassing those who have a different belief than him and a different acceptance of the policies of our president needs to be enacted by violence. Now, I have heard one individual on Facebook who has claimed that there was a justification for this, that the justification for Mr. Kino Jimenez, for using the violence and that assault on those teenagers was justified because the kids were talking about lynching someone, about basically they were using racist language. Except I have yet to find anywhere on YouTube, anywhere on the internet, any statement that says that. I heard a person on Facebook say that, but I have yet to see this anywhere else. Is this still going? It should be going. I see it. It's live. Sorry. I'm just checking out if my podcast is going okay, and it looks like it's going fine. Can everyone still hear me all right? Then let me check that. Yeah, I just want to make sure everyone's able to see this okay. So, as I was saying about this gentleman, Mr. Kino Jimenez, that when he committed this crime, and I've heard someone say, oh, well, it's justified because of the racism that wasn't in the video of the event. which is about 21 seconds long, they're saying, oh, no, well, it was justified. It was completely justified because Mr. Jimenez overheard them talking about the racism. Well, no, it's not, because what that is saying, again, it goes back to Maxine Waters. You heard something you didn't like, and because you didn't like it, that allows you, and the person who's saying it is now classified as a Nazi, and therefore, since they are a Nazi, because of their viewpoint, their political viewpoint, not that they're a Nazi or that they have Nazi viewpoints, but because they're viewpoints that don't agree with what you think, that then makes them a Nazi because you don't agree with it. And since they're a Nazi, and since we've been told by many on the left, especially in the leadership like Maxine Waters, Representative Maxine Waters, that justifies then making an assault on them, which this guy did. And that's what I mean by we've lost civility. We've lost the ability to talk to the other side. We can't have conversations anymore because we're looking at people going and saying, well, the answer is, if I don't agree with you, well, that means you're evil incarnate. And if you're evil incarnate, well, then I can do anything. And I'm perfectly justified in actually taking physical action rather than actually listening. I can shout you down and stop you from speaking, including the use of force to do so. That creates violence. And like I said, that violence would then lead into, I believe it can lead into a war. And if we see that, especially if we see that the far left is losing, if they were to start losing this fight after a couple of years, because I think it would take at least 2 years for this happen, and we start seeing China, and I'm pretty sure from day one, China, Russia, North Korea, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and every other group that you can think of that hates America, not just hates, we're not talking about they hate the left or they hate the right, because these people don't hate the left or the right. They hate America. They hate the Constitution. They hate everything about us. They're going to come on in. And I know there's a lot of people, there's about 44% of millennials believe that socialism is the right idea. We have groups like the Democratic Socialists of America with Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. She's out there. She's running for Congress now as a socialist. And they have this idea that socialism is a great idea, that it works well, except, just take a moment and actually look this up for yourself. How many people are trying to get into socialist nations? How many people from socialist nations are trying to get into America? I guarantee you the number of people who are trying to get into America from a socialist nation, probably all of them combined, let me put it like this. The number of people who are trying to leave socialist nations to get into America compared to the number of people who are trying to leave America to go to a socialist nation, it's 10 times in favor of America that they're trying to get here. I guarantee you. I'd say it's at least 10 times. Haven't done the full math on that. I know on several countries it is, but I'd say overall 10 times as many people, which should tell you something about socialist nations. That people are not trying to get in to socialist nations. Socialism has a problem. Look at Venezuela. It is burning. 500 people killed. No one knows what's going on down there. There is no safety. That's the same Venezuela, same socialist ideas that 3 years ago Senator Bernie Sanders was saying what America should be like. Well, this is the fruit of that seed, is that the country went into complete turmoil because socialism doesn't work. So when you say that, if we're in a civil war and these socialist nations start coming in, if we start seeing all the individuals who hate America itself and hate the existence of our democratic republic, and they come in and they try and they're not going to help the left because that would be preserving America. They don't want to preserve America. They want to destroy it. Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Russia, China, the communist systems, they don't want to preserve America. They want to destroy it. They want to destroy the Declaration of Independence. They want to destroy your right to be able to speak and to think and to do. They want you to be a cog in their wheel, and they want our resources, which are some of the greatest resources in the world. They want everything we have, and they don't want us to have it. So they would very likely join into any civil war that would be going on, which means that the coasts would no longer be parts of America fighting other parts of America. It would quickly devolve into the coasts fighting against the center of America because the coasts are no longer American. That all these other groups would come out to the edges of our nation and start tearing us apart. And this could be something that would last. And basically, you would see this devolve, I believe, very quickly, either into a civil war in the United States that looks like any country in Africa, almost any country in Africa, where we're seeing constant fighting, a civil war that lasts 10, 20 years, constantly fighting with a lot of outside forces being involved who are funding one side or the other as the fighting continues and continues and continues ad nauseum with no real end in sight because of all the outside influences pushing that fight to continue because they have ulterior advantages and goals in this. So it either do that and you're looking at a 10 to 20 year conflict, or very likely this escalates into a world war. That's what American Civil War actually means. It would mean that we're very likely looking at a World War III starting up, because again, once we're fighting other Americans and other groups come in, that means ISIS is involved. That means the Middle East is involved. That means that you could possibly see the Korean Peninsula involved. You could possibly see communists like China and Cuba involved. You could see potentially every group that hates or wants something in America involved. And they're all sending in troops, which means now it stops being a civil war. And if we have outside forces, say all of a sudden a platoon of communist Chinese troops are caught or killed in a fight, say in LA, and there's infighting in LA, but a group of confirmed communist, Chinese communist faction military are there. Well, now China's involved. So that's international, which then triggers NATO, which then triggers all of our allies to start getting involved. So Germany and France and England and all the rest of the NATO powers are now supposed to move and take some action against China or Russia, because it could be Russia doing that, or anyone in the Middle East. And now they're involved in this. So now you have NATO and some parts of the United States involved in a fight against other parts of the United States and communist or other foreign entities, other nations. So as soon as one nation falls in, all the other nations have to get involved, one after the other, either because of treaties or because of proximity. Like Canada would have to be involved in this. They would have to take a side. They're not going to be neutral on this. And England would be involved. And that means everyone else has to get involved. And suddenly you're at a world war. Everyone's fighting everywhere. And who knows what happens with that? Do I think it gets nuclear? No. But do I think it would be a good thing? No. No. I think it could be very, very bad very quickly. I think it could be very terrifying very, very quickly. So that's a big thing. Excuse me, I had to take a drink there. But what do you guys think? I know I'm talking, I've done some research on this, but by no means do I have all the answers, and by no means have I researched the whole thing. Now, there are still a lot of questions here. So tell me, what do you think? Do you think this is my assessment correct? Could that lead, the fact that there could be an American Civil War, that it's accurate? And if it does happen, that it could lead to not just a civil war, but the Civil War would lead to eventually a international war, a war of World War III, conventional war, with everyone trying to get to America first and trying to take it over. I mean, you might even see something like what we've seen before. It would be like the movie Red Dawn. I mean, not the remake, the original. And a lot of people may have seen that or maybe not. It's actually a pretty decent movie. It's an interesting concept, and it's not a perfect movie by any means, but it's a good movie. And it does handle a very difficult conversation pretty well. What would happen if there were groups from outside the nation trying to take over? What if they all tried to come in? And I think it'd be, except in this case, it's not just a foreign power trying to come into America. I mean, even the Japanese in World War II realized that if you try and just enter America just because, well, every blade of grass would have a gun behind it. And you're fighting everyone in the nation. It'd be the biggest army in the world. It's estimated somewhere around 100 million people. 1/3 of the nation fully may be armed or would become quickly armed and be able to fight you. There is no military in the world that has 100 million people. It's just not possible. So it's unlikely and unrealistic to say that any foreign power would just try and enter America. But if we are in the middle of a civil war where we have people fighting against each other, so you have 100 million, 200 million Americans fighting against each other, and then you wanted to come in as a foreign power and try and attack, you've just made your odds a whole lot better. You have, 50, 100 million people that would be on your side. Even if it were 10 million people, that's 10 million. That's an army of 10 million plus whatever you can add to it. That makes your odds a whole lot better. A whole lot better. And that's with conventional weapons, because no one would want to dare try and throw nukes into that mix. It just gets too volatile too quickly. But can you imagine that? I mean, that's just insane. Oh, by the way, I see Sandy is here, and I see Phil is listening as well. Sorry I didn't see you there for a while. But it would be insane. And that's the problem. Because no one would just try and jump into America like that. No. But if we were already in a conflict, then they would pile on. And that essentially means that no matter what would happen at the end of the day out of that kind of a conflict, we all lose. We all lose. Because at the end of the day of that kind of conflict, the only way it gets resolved is that America no longer exists. There would be so many other countries involved and so many other things happening that we would wind up destroying each other. But I also see that Tina has another question. I want to answer that. And she says, and I want to answer that in full, so bear with me a moment. Tina says, and that is just one more reason you don't give up your guns ever. Guns were never in the Constitution for the reason of hunting. True. I never thought of the possibility of other nations trying to take advantage of the situation. It seems like a reasonable conclusion, but not sure they would be able to sustain anything without the military getting involved in protecting the nation in place of anything going on within our borders. Well, Tina, I agree with you to an extent. And let me again clarify. Part of what I'm saying is that there wouldn't be an American military at that point. If we have an American Civil War, our military would be divided. It wouldn't be 100% in favor of one side or another. There would be a division there. I think that the majority of our military, call it 60, 50%, probably 75%, would likely be on the side of a more conservative viewpoint than Antifa. In fact, I think very, very little of our government of our military would ever consider Antifa to be accurate or on their side, but there would be some. But because of that, we would be so busy with that fighting, and the military would lose some of its cohesion. It would lose some of its chain of command. And obviously, there would be even some people who wouldn't want to fight against other American citizens. So there would be a loss of some of those numbers as well. So you'd have some inefficiency within the military that would exist, and its focus would be very much internal. And if it's internalized, then all these outside forces that I don't think they come in one big wave. I don't think it's like, okay, there's an American Civil War 2 years into the event. All of a sudden, we see, on day one, all of a sudden China jumps in and they have, their C-130 equivalents coming out and troops landing on California soil. No, I don't think it happens like that. I don't think that the Mexican army suddenly organizes and comes forward and crosses the border. I don't think that happens either. I don't even think the drug cartels move forward and try and take over. No, they wouldn't do that, at least not initially. What you would see is perhaps smaller groups like the MS-13 gang would start trying to centralize on certain towns and trying to capture some of that area as the rest of this conflict is going on, trying to avoid getting involved directly as much as possible while gaining as much control as possible of certain land and segments so that they're not directly having to fight, but yet they have a lot of control. And at the same time, you would see influences like a bunch of freedom fighters from ISIS or Al-Qaeda, and that's what they like to call themselves, and other of their terrorists would be coming over in groups looking to fight and help disorganize and disorient both sides. And these are cells that would be coming in and they'd be attacking both sides at the same time so as to continue to increase the confusion and to take out more of the actual fighters and to weaken the nation and take out key critical infrastructure points so as the nation to be that much weaker so that a year, 2 years down the road, they can then step in with another military and say, hey, guess what we can do right now? Since you're all disorganized and you're much weaker and there's far fewer people fighting or willing to fight, we can step right on in and we can now try and take some of everything from you. And that's why I see that initially you would see something like China or North Korea or Russia or Venezuela or a number of nations that don't like the existence of America, that they would put in support to one faction or another that's fighting and causing the civil war to keep them going because it's in their best interest. And they would drop maybe a few troops, nothing, commando troops essentially, and they would help them to train them and help them fight so that they could continue this fight. Again, it would be using up our resources, disrupting our infrastructure, destroying part of the command structure of our military, creating a lot of confusion, a lot of damage, and weakening the nation overall. And then as that progresses and we get that much worse off, well, then it becomes that much easier. And then 2, 3 years later, year 3, 4, 5, somewhere in there, maybe year 10, after we've sufficiently killed enough people, destroyed enough of the property, damaged enough of everything, that they would then come in and say, okay, now we can actually land troops because there's no real opposition left. You've used up all the people who would have the opposition, all the firepower, the weapons, the infrastructure, the command structure would all be used up. And so they could then try and fight that, because anyone who would try that beforehand would unify the nation, I would think, or unify the majority of the nation at the very least. And therefore, at that moment, they would lose. So that's the danger of it. It's very subtle. It's very subtle. None of this happens right away. It doesn't happen overnight. The thing that does happen overnight, though, is if we saw full-scale warfare, we would see fighting across the nation very quickly, and it would be very centralized. And I tell you what, it's not going to be in the middle of Nebraska, really. It's going to be on the coast. Chicago, I'll give you that. It'd be Chicago. Parts of Florida, which again is the coast. Maybe a couple of isolated cities here and there. Flint, Michigan, as an example. Yeah, you could see it in some of those places. But realistically, that's going to be shut down real quick. The real fighting is going to be on the coast. LA, New York, Philadelphia, places like that. And, Washington State, Portland. You're going to see those kind of areas are going to be the big areas of where the fighting is going to be. If there were to be a American Civil War. And they would be able to hold out for quite some time. And because there is other little places like, Flint, Michigan as an example, there would be pockets in, Detroit, Chicago, which I think would be complete war zones that just would lose their minds. They would instantly become as bad as Somalia or any other area that we've seen in the world, Darfur, where you're just seeing massive, large-scale, constant fighting, total devastation. No, total anarchy. No kind of law whatsoever would be in there. But because those areas would be there, it would be disruptive enough that no one would just overrun New York City. Not that you really can't. It's 20 million people. So even at 8 million people, by some census standards, say there's only 8 million people, you're still not overrunning New York. Even if New York was in full-scale fighting, you're not overrunning it by either side. It's too many people. Same thing in LA with what they have, about 3 to 5 million people. You're not overrunning over LA overnight. It's just not possible. So Philadelphia, a couple million people. You're not overrunning it overnight. Chicago. You're not overrunning these cities. So you don't see a quick resolution here. So that brings you into the long term. And I think it's terrifying to me, both because this is very, very realistic, I believe. And I believe I can see a very realistic path to a civil war, as well as the consequences of a civil war. And I kind of hope that somebody can turn around and tell me, Mike, I'm missing something. Mike, you're missing something, and this is why this will never happen. Or, Mike, this is why, if it does happen, you're wrong. It's going to end very quickly. And that, this will get resolved easily, and the nation will become better. I hope someone can do that. I really, really do. I would really prefer to be wrong. I would really, really prefer that someone were to go out there and just, like a lightning bolt coming down with it, and suddenly just go, bang, there you go, Mike. You were wrong. You did not understand this, that there's something else to be understood here. I just don't see it. I just don't see that being possible. I don't see that being a reality. I would like to think that's a reality. Just making sure that I didn't miss anybody so far. I would like to think that's a reality. I'd like to think that that's possible. But I'm not sure that it is. And in my research, I'm not seeing how I'm wrong. And it's a scary thought. But I think that one of the ways to prevent it from happening is this very conversation. Making people aware. Because if we don't have this conversation, if we don't go out there and say, hey, stop for a second, let's actually get back to civility. The consequences of us not having this conversation, of us not being civil with each other, of not trying to work together to resolve the nation, the consequences of that are far, far greater in detriment to us all than just, this argument. No one's going to win overnight. This isn't going to be a once and done kind of thing. This is not going to be simple. And it's going to have devastating consequences no matter which side is leading at any given moment. It's going to be a very painful kind of situation. And so I think it's very important that we're all involved in this. that we're all talking about this, that we stop and say, hey, let's have a conversation about this. Because if we don't do this, the outcome is just, it's devastating. It's terrifying. It scares me. It really does. I mean, it's, I don't even know how to explain it. It's just, you know, can you imagine that? Can you imagine that just some kind of boots marching down the street and people fighting day in, day out, over and over and over again. That kind of terrifies me. That kind of scares me. And to see that, and to be very, very clear that other countries may be involved in that as well, that's kind of scary. And that it would not end. It doesn't end quickly. It's just devastating. But, you know, please tell me, guys, everybody, did I miss something? Am I wrong? Have I not gotten it right? Have I missed something about why this won't happen, or how we could prevent it from happening? Is there the outcome wrong, that I'm missing something? I mean, I don't want to be facetious. I mean, obviously it wouldn't be rainbows and unicorns coming out, but is there something realistic that I'm missing here? I mean, truly, I'd love to hear that. I would like to know that from anybody, to tell me that, you know, I've missed it, that I'm just not getting it. Because, you know, I'm more than willing, especially with this subject, to say, hey, Mike, you know, just got it wrong. I would like to be wrong. But I think it's important. And I don't see a lot of talking going on right now. I don't see a lot of people speaking about this. And I do want to say, hey, say hi. Woof, woof. Yeah, you're on camera. Okay, go. So that was my puppy, Khan. He obviously thought I was being too serious, so he wanted to come in, you know, smile and get me happy. Hopefully that'll help make everyone else feel happy. So it's a very serious subject. We're talking about a serious issue, and it's serious consequences to a nation, with and serious consequences to the world. And I would tell you that it's my belief, hey Edwin, it's my belief that, you know, people in other nations, you know, especially our allies in Canada and England, Germany, France, Japan, that they would all be scared. I am sure that if they're looking at this, and if we're seeing so many people are so confident that there could be a civil war, which kind of feeds the fact that there could be a civil war, I would hope and pray that they're doing their own math on this and realizing that they could very easily be drawn into a situation where there's a global war because of this, and they don't want that. It's not there in their advantage. By the way, something I completely forgot about and didn't even consider until just this moment talking about it is, if there's an American Civil War, the entire world goes into not a recession, they go into a depression. We are the largest economy in the world. We are the driving economy of the world. More important than just being big, we drive the economy of the world, both in terms of innovation, of goods being used, consumed, created, innovations on efficiencies of systems. We're it. And if we're in a war, then the rest of the world is screwed, because there's no one who's taking over our place. There is no nation that creates and ships out more food than we do. So there are nations that would start getting hungrier and not able to have a diversity of foods that we provide to them. We have a lot of things that we ship across the world through our various companies. Things are going to get to people a lot slower. A lot of the goods and products that people use around the world would not be available, whether that's cell phones or computers or tablets, the services that people use all the time, just not going to be able to be upkept and maintained. Not if there's a civil war going on. So the rest of the world is going to be very, very negatively impacted. All the cars, a lot of the parts for the cars, steel and aluminum alone are going to go down. The capability of being able to construct things are going to be affected. I mean, I'm just going off the top of my head. I hadn't actually even thought about that. The stock markets are going to be negatively impacted massively. Companies losing money all over the place. People losing retirement funds or investments. Wholesale just being wiped out. So you have economic repercussions on this. Banks are not being able to transfer money being frozen in assets. Economy, the cash not being in existence. I mean, what would the dollar be valued on then? How would the dollar be valued at that point? So you're looking at a chain reaction across the world just because the United States is in a civil war. We can't help but involve every nation in the world on several different aspects. And again, that gives them another motivation to actually be involved in this on one side or the other for either faction that may be in the war because of the economics and the resources and the business and the goods. Because no nation in the world will be untouched. You know, what about all those nations that we've been supplying every year? Tens of millions of dollars of food and aid and services that suddenly will be cut right off. No one else is going to do it. No one else is doing it. No one else is stepping in like the United States does to provide aid and food and comfort and support. No other country is willing to do that. No other country is doing that. What happens to all of those nations? And I should stand a little corrected there because let me correct that. China does do that to an extent for certain countries in Africa, which is why, the leading nation investing into foreign nationals in Africa and the various nations, 20 some odd nations in Africa, is China, not the United States. We don't have the biggest influence in Africa. China does, because China's been making a lot more of an investment and has been consistently making that investment into upgrading the African continent, but not the United States. Not that that's helped the African continent for the most part, and not that it's raised up their quality of life at all. But if we were in a civil war, then all these other nations in South America, Middle East, parts of Africa, all across the globe suddenly are economically involved in this because they're not able to support themselves. Caribbean, the Pacific Islanders, all over the world. They're all affected by this. So I'm really scared. And again, I'm still waiting. And please give me your questions. This is just my thoughts on this, on whether this is a reality, whether this is a possibility, and what are the consequences of this. I could be wrong. I don't think I'm wrong. I don't think I've made incorrect calculations. I don't believe I've misunderstood the repercussions and the probable consequences, nor how do we get into this event? How does it happen to us? I don't think I've missed any of that, but it's possible I could. Please tell me what you think. Tell me if you think I'm wrong. Tell me if you think I've missed something here. That if we were, that the reality is, and I would say it's probably 3 years away. I know the poll by Rasmussen Report said that it would be within the next 5 years. I believe it's within 3 years we could possibly see this, because the level of discourse, of animosity, of anger, of violence is at this point at such a high level. We essentially have everything in place. We're almost intractable on the two sides. The far left is almost intractable in its beliefs and its unwillingness to hear anything else or compromise. And I do blame the far left far more than anyone else, because you really don't see that on the far right. When I say that, let's think about that. Well, publicly, who can we name? There's Antifa, there's BAM, BAMN, by any means necessary is the name of that organization. There's the Political Leaders of Tomorrow, also called PLOT. There's Occupy Wall Street. So there's a dozen other smaller, but still the same kind of different organizations on the left that all have the same goal. And we can name them. What can you name on the right? Tea Party, which isn't really one organization. Nor is the Tea Party known for any violence. Ever. Ever. They have never committed any violence. They've never had any arrests at any of their events for violence. Has never happened. Not since the existence of the Tea Party. And we know this is a fact. It's documented. Never happened. But we have seen Antifa attack the Tea Party, and that there was an arrest of Antifa people against the Tea Party. But we've never actually we're not seeing anyone on the right do this. So yeah, I do believe the catalyst for this is all coming from the far left, which is not the same thing as Democrats. It's not the same thing as liberals. It is the same thing as progressives. I do believe that. But I think the average person isn't on the side of Antifa. But I do believe Antifa is pushing everyone further and further to the left. And we see that. I mean, Maxine Waters is going to the left. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, they're moving to the left. Local politicians, Anthony Brindisi is moving to the left. Governor Cuomo is moving to the left. We're seeing a lot of people move to the left. Severely and strongly to extremes. But we're not seeing any kind of communication. And when I'm looking at the consequences, as I've just laid out, as I've just discussed with you, if the consequences are correct, if I am right, and the consequences of this are civil war because of this incivility, and it gets a spark, what's going to happen is one day there's going to be this incident. It'll probably be from Antifa or some similar group, maybe Occupy Wall Street, or some other such group. And they're going to be protesting at an event, probably because someone on the right is trying to speak at an event to someone. And there's going to be violence, and Antifa is going to come out and say beforehand on social media, they'll probably say that they're going to commit violence. And they go into the event, and they're planning to have violence, and some other organization or group is going to see that they're planning violence, and they're going to come out saying, okay, we're going to stop them. And both sides are absolutely committed to doing exactly what they're saying, and they're not willing to talk to each other, they're not willing to hear each other, and they're not willing to let anyone else intervene. And some kid is going to get caught in the middle of this. Maybe a few young kids are going to get caught in the middle of this, and they're going to get hurt. And both sides are going to blame each other on that. And the nation's going to pick sides on who they believe, because there won't be video of the event. There won't be audio of the event. There's going to be eyewitnesses on both sides saying exactly the same thing, that the other guy did it. And because kids are involved, it's going to be national news. It's going to be on all of the media. Everyone's going to be talking about it. It's going to be everywhere. And both sides are going to blame each other. And they're going to call each other Nazis and evil, evil creatures. I don't want to curse. And they're going to say this about each other to a degree that we've never seen before. We're going to see politicians pick sides on this with only hearsay information, with no evidence, no one listening to any other group. And people are going to pick sides, say, you know what, these guys are right, those guys are wrong, period. And the other guys are evil, so our guys are good. And politicians will pick sides. Not just like, oh, kind of, sort of, like Maxine Waters and Keith Ellison at this moment, but they're actually going to, candidates like Anthony Brindisi, they're not going to just pick sides. They're going to be like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and they're going to pick a side. And they're going to say that they believe just the one side. And we should stand by. And matter of fact, that was the example of what we should be doing. That's what that person's going to say. And that'll be the spark. And all of a sudden, you'll see copycats across the nation. And that will be the match that sets off the fire. And I can see that happening within 3 years. And I really, really hope that I am wrong. I really, really hope someone proves me wrong. I really pray that this cannot happen. I don't want to be right about this. I am very, very sure that I am right, but I pray and I hope that I can't be right. I pray and I hope that that won't happen. It's not the thing I want to see. Not in any way, shape, or form. I want to be wrong on this. I really, really do. And I'm really hoping that I can be wrong on this, because it would terrify me. And I think it would hurt and harm the nation. I mean, what do you guys think? You tell me. I'm talking, but I'm here listening to you guys. I'm just giving you my thoughts. And I know Tina's had a few thoughts, but I know there's others who have a thought. Hit me with it. Tell me where I'm wrong. Please tell me I'm wrong. Please tell me I am wrong. Tell me that I'm not understanding something. Tell me that I have forgotten something, I didn't understand something, that there's some other part to this that I just don't get. Please tell me that there's something else. Please tell me that I've missed it. I just don't get it. I haven't figured it out. I didn't understand something. Tell me how I'm wrong, please, because I want to be. I want to be wrong. I would like to be wrong. I can only hope that I would be wrong. And I hope that, Facebook hasn't chopped this up too much. I know how it likes to, on the more controversial conversations, Facebook likes to block off people. But I hope that everyone's hearing this in full and seeing it. And it will be on my podcast, of course. And I will have that out in case someone's missed any part of it. You won't be able to see me, but you'll be able to hear the full conversation. But I have to say, this is terrifying. Does anyone think I'm wrong? Anyone out there think I'm wrong? There's a few of you listening, and I know there'll be several dozens afterwards. And please, leave your comments, because I do want to hear your comments. I want to make sure that I know what's, I'll be checking on the notes on this constantly, and I will be looking to see, what thoughts are there. There was at least one interruption by Facebook. Hopefully not too many. And Tina happens to mention that she had noticed only one short pause. So it seems Facebook has been relatively good today and not shutting it down. They like to shut down the conversation a lot. And Tina also mentions that she says, quote, no, excuse me, quote, sadly, no, I think you are correct, end quote. Yeah, I know. I think I'm right too. I've thought about this, as you can, if you haven't noticed, anyone listening, I've thought about this, and I hope other people think about this, and I hope other people are scared about this. I hope other people are concerned and nervous about this. I hope that this is not something that makes people happy or it's a bad thought exercise. There is no win in this. This does not win. Conservatives don't win. Liberals don't win. Progressives don't win. Antifa won't win. Nobody wins. This is not a good thing for America. It doesn't have a happy ending. Everybody loses, because it's going to harm a lot of people. And for those who are offended by cigarette smoking, if you see me smoking in this, what can you do? If that's the worst thing, again, just say you don't like it, but it's not something that hopefully it doesn't cause people to run away in droves or something. I'm not perfect. No one is. And again, I'm not perfect in what I'm thinking. I just can't see where my logic, based on the facts that are here. And again, we're not talking about feelings. This is not it's not my personal feeling. I don't feel like this is a good thing or a bad thing. And, it's not feelings. Let's get away from that, please. anyone who wants to comment, whatever you want to say, that's fantastic. Please do me a favor. I don't care what people feel. And when I say that, I mean, kind of like the microaggressions. I feel like you've microaggression. No, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care about microaggressions. That's part of the problem. That's part of the problem. Microaggressions. I need a safe space. These are problems. These are the things that are getting us to this eventual, I believe, civil war. Because we've lost all sense of reality and all that is, in saying that you've been microaggressed, in saying that you need a safe space, in self-segregating yourself. All that's doing is shutting down conversation, disabling the ability to speak and to discuss and come to a compromise or to understand the other side. You can't have a conversation with that. To tell them in this whole silliness about, well, people are biased at an unconscious level. What? How would you know? And if you did, how would you know? You couldn't do anything about it. It's unconscious. Who cares? I don't care about what people unconsciously may think. I care about what people consciously do. There's a difference there. People think things all the time. I'm worried about what people do. But we have so many people who are trying to shape the way people think and shape the way people feel and to have people react based on their feelings without any thought whatsoever and condition them to only have certain types of thoughts. That's terrifying because that leads to only one other thing. When you have two people that are trying to use the same resources in the same system, and one person is trying to use the system based on a thought, a rational thought, and another one's using it based on an irrational feeling. And yes, all feelings are irrational. There's nothing empirical about a feeling. And when you have that feeling going up against that empirical rational thought, you're going to have a conflict. You can't help but not have a conflict. So every time you hear someone talking about microaggressions, they're talking about safe spaces, they're talking about self-segregation. When you hear all this kind of conversation, all you're hearing, what that is someone saying, I don't want to hear any rational thought. I just want to react. I just want to have an emotional reaction, which is irrational. And that's promoting going towards a civil war. That's what it is, in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I misunderstand something about that. I don't see how, and I don't see where. But it's possible. It's a lot. It's a lot of conversation. And it's a lot of thought. And between my podcast yesterday, which was talking about this and going into greater detail on how this came about, how did we get to this point, and what the data is and what information is available there and I source it. I have a lot of sources, and I'll probably put a few of them again on this podcast as well, so people have things to reflect on, to look at, to see how I got to this conclusion. But I go into greater depth on how it came about, how we gotten to this point in yesterday's podcast, as well as some of the part of the outcome that I see here. Today was more of an explanation of more of that. And I hope that as people hear this, and I hope share this, let other people know, whether it's on Facebook or whether it's on my podcast or however, it's all free, so it doesn't matter. Put it out there, respond to this. Let's have conversation on this. Let's talk about this. Let's really get involved about this. And as more people get that opportunity, maybe we can find an answer. Maybe there's something, please point out the thing that I missed. Point out the thing I'm not getting. Point out the thing that changes this. Let's find that. I'm one man, and I know I'm nowhere near smart enough to do that. But I guarantee you we have a nation of 330 million people. If we're talking about this, if we actually talk, I guarantee we can find a way to change the course. But if we don't, I don't know how it doesn't keep moving down this road. because we're on this road because there is no conversation, because there is no thought, because there is no discussion. And that's the scary thing. But I've been on here for about an hour and a half now, as usual, with my podcast, and I enjoyed having everyone on here with me. I do want to thank Chris Jones, Tina DeBella. I want to thank Edwin, DJ Rec, Phil Cahill, Sandy Salas. I want to thank as well Heather Nowacki. I'm sorry, Heather, I thought I had said something to you before. Robert Force, Ellis Madison, Kevin Reed, Scott Hopus, Irma Ludwig. Hey, Irma. I think I said something to you as well. And Ron Stafford. I want to thank all of you guys for being involved here today and listening in, as well as the others that I didn't see and I didn't get to mention, and anyone else who may see this afterwards. Please comment, share. Let's talk about this. Let's get this word out, and let's see if we can come up with something. I'll have the podcast out a little bit later today, and otherwise, I thank you all, and I hope everyone has a very safe, a very good day, a very good week, a good month, and we'll be at this again in a week or so. Talk to you soon.
It's after midnight. This moon's fit for a howl. The whiskey should have washed away this heartache by now. These visions of you, oh, but they're just a moon. That's as true with me, that's true with you. That's as true with me, that's true with you. They say seeking, these shall find. Looked in your direction and I found mine. We're both worried about the hands of time, and that's as true with me, it's true with you. That's as true with me, it's true with you. Two young lovers on a moonlit night, lost souls searching for the light. Someone should have told them that love is blind. Yeah, they'll be searching their whole damn lives. And that's as true with me, it's true with you. And that's as true with me, it's true with you. They say seeking, these shall find. Looked in your direction and I found mine. We're both worried about the hands of time. And that's as true with me, it's true with you. And that's as true with me, it's true with you. It's after midnight. This moon's fit for a howl. The whiskey should have washed away this heartache by now. These visions of you, oh, but they're just a that's as true with me, that's true with you. And that's as true with me, that's true with you. And that's this trouble with me, this trouble.